I came home to find 2 HOA trucks parked inside my garage like they owned the place. No call. No notice. Just pure entitlement. So I did the only thing they didn't expect. I locked the door, walked away, and let the law handle what happened next. I knew something was wrong the moment my garage door refused to open all the way. At first, I thought the sensor was jammed again. It had been acting up ever since the HOA forced me to replace non-approved exterior fixtures, which somehow included a perfectly functional garage light I'd installed years earlier. I pressed the button again. The motor whined, strained, then stopped halfway with a dull metallic thud. That's when I noticed the unfamiliar reflections on the inside panel: chrome, decals, bright white paint. My stomach tightened. I lifted the door manually and froze. 2 HOA trucks were parked inside my garage. Not 1, 2. Full-size utility trucks, plastered with the association's logo, tool racks bolted on top, orange cones stacked in the bed. They were parked inches from my workbench, blocking my freezer, my shelves, my breaker panel. One of them had oil stains already spreading across my concrete floor. For a solid 10 seconds, I just stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. No email. No notice. No emergency alert. Just my private garage, occupied like it was community storage. I stepped back into the driveway and checked the address on my house like maybe I'd wandered into someone else's life by mistake. Same numbers. Same peeling paint on the mailbox the HOA had threatened to fine me over. This was my home. I pulled out my phone and searched my inbox. Nothing. No temporary access request. No maintenance emergency. No, we regret to inform you. Just silence. That silence told me everything. This wasn't a mistake. This was entitlement. I'd been on the HOA's radar ever since I moved in. I didn't attend meetings. I didn't smile and nod. I asked for things in writing. And worst of all, I had the audacity to read the bylaws before responding to their letters. That alone had turned me into a problem resident. The president, Karen, of course, had made it clear she didn't like me during our first interaction. She'd stood on my porch with a clipboard and that tight smile people wear when they're used to being obeyed. "We just want cooperation," she'd said. What she meant was compliance. Apparently, cooperation now included using my garage as their personal parking lot. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, and took a slow breath. Anger flared hot and fast, but beneath it was something calmer. Sharper. I'd learned a long time ago that reacting emotionally was exactly what people like this wanted. They thrived on confrontation. So instead of storming over to the HOA office, instead of calling and yelling, instead of touching a single thing inside that garage, I locked the door. Then I locked the interior door leading from the garage into my house. Deadbolt. Chain. Everything. Only after that did I start documenting. Photos first, wide shots showing both trucks clearly inside my garage, close UPS of the logos, license plates, VIN numbers, the oil stain on my floor, the blocked electrical panel. I made sure the timestamp was visible. Then I recorded a slow video walkthrough, narrating calmly, clearly, like I was explaining it to a jury instead of my phone. "This is my private residential garage," I said. "I did not give permission for any HOA vehicles to be parked here. No notice was provided." Next, I pulled out the deed. The survey. The section of the bylaws they loved to ignore. The one that explicitly stated the HOA had no right of access to private structures without owner consent or a verified emergency involving utilities. There was no emergency. I checked the trucks again. No hazard lights. No tools in use. No workers in sight. Just 2 vehicles sitting comfortably on my property like they belonged there. That's when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "Please do not interfere with HOA operations. Vehicles will be removed shortly." No apology. No explanation. Just an order. I smiled. Instead of replying, I called the non-emergency police line. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't exaggerate. I simply stated the facts. Unauthorized vehicles parked inside my locked private garage, property accessed without consent, owner requesting documentation and assistance. The dispatcher asked me to confirm the address. Then she paused. "They're inside your garage?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Behind a closed door." Another pause. "An officer will be dispatched." I sat down at my kitchen table and waited. 15 minutes later, there was frantic knocking at my front door. Not the calm, professional knock of law enforcement. This was sharp, urgent, panicked. Through the window, I saw Karen. Her face was flushed. Her clipboard was gone. Her confidence with it. I didn't open the door. I watched as she pulled out her phone, pacing, gesturing wildly at the garage like the building itself had betrayed her. Because in a way it had. For the first time since I moved in, the HOA had crossed a line they couldn't talk their way back over. And they were about to learn that my garage wasn't community property. It was evidence. The first thing I did after locking the garage door was check my security footage. I already knew the HOA had crossed a line, but I wanted everything documented. Timestamps, license plates, faces, the moment they decided my private garage was community property. The video showed 2 HOA maintenance trucks pulling into my driveway mid-morning, the drivers hopping out like they'd done this 100 times before. No knocking. No phone call. One of them even whistled as he opened my garage and pulled straight inside. That was the moment my irritation turned into something colder and more deliberate. I paused the footage and zoomed in on the trucks. Both had HOA decals. Clear as day. I exported the clips, backed them up to 2 drives, and emailed a copy to myself. Then I checked my phone logs. No missed calls, no emails, no notices. Nothing. They hadn't asked. They hadn't warned me. They'd simply assumed. About 20 minutes after I locked the garage, my phone started buzzing. First call, unknown number. I let it ring. Second call, same number. Ignored. Third call, voicemail. The tone was already different, less confident, more urgent. The man on the other end introduced himself as an HOA facilities supervisor and asked me to please open the garage so our staff can retrieve the vehicles. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Just an assumption that I'd comply. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, another call came in. This time it was her. The HOA president. The same woman who'd been nitpicking my property for months. Grass height, fence color, mailbox placement. Her voice on the voicemail was sharp, clipped, and irritated. She said parking in my garage was standard procedure during a neighborhood drainage inspection and accused me of interfering with HOA operations. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was entitlement. I called my attorney. He didn't even hesitate. After watching the footage, he said the words I'd been hoping to hear. That's trespassing. Clear cut. He explained it calmly. HOA authority doesn't extend into private garages without permission or emergency cause. They had no easement, no warrant, no notice, and by entering with vehicles, they'd escalated it from a civil issue into something potentially criminal. Do not open that garage, he said. Let them make the next move. And they did. Within the hour, 2 HOA board members showed up at my door. I watched them from the window as they stood on my porch, arms crossed, whispering to each other like they were planning a lecture. When I finally opened the door, the president launched into me immediately, accusing me of being uncooperative, threatening fines, even hinting at a lien. I let her finish. Then I told her I'd already contacted my lawyer, and that the police had been notified regarding unauthorized entry and vehicle trespassing on my property. Her face changed instantly. The confidence drained. The posture stiffened. She tried to backpedal, saying it was all a miscommunication, and that they were just doing their job. I reminded her that doing your job doesn't include breaking into private property. She demanded I unlock the garage immediately. I refused. That's when the police arrived. 2 officers pulled up, lights off but presence unmistakable. I handed them the footage, the property deed, and the lack of any HOA authorization. They watched the video carefully, asked a few questions, and then turned to the HOA president. The conversation shifted fast. What started as her complaining about me ended with the officers explaining trespassing laws, unauthorized vehicle storage, and potential charges. One of the truck drivers, still stuck inside my garage, looked pale when the officer asked if he'd been instructed to enter without permission. Yes, he admitted quietly. That sealed it. The officers asked me if I wanted to file a formal trespassing report. I said yes, calmly, clearly. No shouting. No theatrics. The HOA president tried one last tactic, claiming I was holding their vehicles hostage. The officer shut that down immediately, explaining that the vehicles were illegally parked and that any delay in retrieving them was the HOA's responsibility, not mine. By the time they left, the power dynamic had completely flipped. The trucks stayed in my garage overnight. And the next morning, the HOA's legal team was suddenly very eager to talk. By the next morning, the situation had already grown teeth. I woke up to 3 missed calls, a voicemail, and a handful of text messages, all from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemail came first. A tight, rehearsed voice informed me that the HOA had urgent concerns regarding restricted access to association vehicles, and that I needed to remedy the situation immediately to avoid escalation. I almost laughed. Instead, I made coffee and watched the security footage. 2 HOA-branded pickup trucks sat exactly where they'd been left the night before, boxed in by my garage walls like trophies. The drivers had clearly returned at some point after I locked up. One of them yanked on the interior release cord so hard it snapped loose, while the other paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, red-faced and furious. When they finally gave up, they left behind muddy footprints and a dent in my drywall. That dent turned out to be important. At 9:14 a.m., a police cruiser rolled into my driveway. I stepped outside before they even knocked. 2 officers stood by the hood, hands resting casually near their belts, posture neutral but alert. One of them glanced past me toward the garage, then back at my face. "Sir," he said, "we received a report about vehicles being unlawfully detained on your property." "I figured you might," I replied calmly. "Before we go any further, I'd like to report a trespass and property damage." That gave them pause. I invited them inside and pulled up the footage. Timestamp. Clear angles. No edits. The moment the HOA trucks crossed the threshold into my garage without permission, the moment the door rolled down, the moment the driver slammed his shoulder into my wall in frustration. One of the officers let out a low whistle. "Did you authorize them to park there?" he asked. "No," I said. "They didn't ask. They didn't notify me. They let themselves in while I was at work." "And the garage is part of your deeded property?" I slid the folder across the table. Survey. Plat map. Deed description. Highlighted, initialed, notarized. The garage wasn't just mine, it was unmistakably mine. The second officer nodded slowly. "That's trespassing. And the damage qualifies as vandalism." Outside, the situation escalated fast. The HOA president arrived in a black SUV, heels clicking aggressively against my driveway like she was marching into battle. She didn't look at me, she went straight to the officers. "These vehicles need to be released immediately," she snapped. "They're essential for community operations." One of the officers turned to her. "Ma'am, those vehicles are currently part of a trespass investigation." Her face twisted. "That's ridiculous. This homeowner is being difficult." The officer didn't budge. "Difficult or not, you don't get to park on private property without consent." She tried again. Threats this time. Fines. Liens. Emergency authority. HOA bylaws. She said association jurisdiction, like it was a magic spell that should override state law. It didn't. When she demanded that I open the garage, I met her eyes for the first time. "You can retrieve your trucks," I said evenly. after the report is filed and the damage is documented. Her mouth fell open. You can't do this. I already did. By noon, things went from embarrassing to catastrophic, for them. A tow company arrived, not to remove the trucks, but to document their condition. Photos were taken. Measurements recorded. The dented drywall was inspected. A repair estimate was emailed directly to the officer's tablet. Then the citation book came out. Both drivers were cited for trespassing. The HOA was cited for property damage. And when the president continued arguing, refusing to step back from the scene, she earned herself a warning for obstruction. That was the moment the crowd formed. Neighbors gathered at the edges of their lawns, phones raised, whispers spreading. The same HOA that sent violation letters for trash bins and grass height was now being read their rights in a driveway they had no claim over. When the garage finally opened, under police supervision, the trucks rolled out quietly, stripped of all their authority. No sirens, no statements, just humiliation. As they left, one officer turned to me. "You did everything right," he said. "If they contact you again about this, call us." They did contact me again, but not the way they expected. That afternoon, I received a certified letter. Not a fine, not a threat, a request. They wanted to resolve the matter amicably. I smiled as I signed for it, because amicable stopped being an option the moment they parked where they didn't belong. By the next morning, the situation had already snowballed beyond what the HOA ever imagined. When I woke up, my phone was flooded with missed calls, voicemails, and texts, all from unfamiliar numbers. A quick listen confirmed exactly what I'd predicted: panic, anger, accusations, and buried beneath all that noise, the slow realization that they had messed up badly. The two trucks were still sitting in my garage, exactly where their drivers had left them the afternoon before. Overnight, police had come by to document everything. They took photos of the vehicles, noted the VIN numbers, and recorded my statement. Trespassing, unauthorized use of private property, and unlawful entry were all officially logged. The officers were calm, professional, and, most importantly, very clear that I had acted within my rights. What really rattled the HOA wasn't the police report. It was the fact that their usual intimidation tactics weren't working. Around mid-morning, I heard shouting outside. I stepped onto my porch just in time to see the HOA president and two board members standing at the edge of my driveway. They weren't yelling at me yet. They were arguing with each other, clearly stressed and trying to decide who was going to take responsibility. One of them kept glancing at the garage like the trucks might magically disappear if she stared hard enough. I stayed quiet and watched. Finally, the HOA president marched up to my door and knocked hard, like she was trying to assert authority with her knuckles alone. When I opened it, her expression shifted instantly, from anger to forced politeness. "We need to resolve this," she said, her voice tight. "This has gone far enough." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply told her that all communication would now go through my attorney and that the police were already involved. That sentence alone drained the color from her face. "You can't do this," one of the board members snapped from behind her. "Those trucks are HOA property." I calmly replied, "They're on my property. Without permission. That makes them evidence." Silence. That was the moment it clicked for them. They weren't dealing with someone they could bully into compliance. They weren't dealing with a confused homeowner who didn't know the bylaws. They were dealing with someone who understood exactly where the HOA's authority ended, and how badly they'd crossed that line. Within an hour, their lawyer called mine. By noon, the tone had completely shifted. No more threats. No more demands. Just requests. Careful, measured requests. They wanted the trucks back. My attorney advised patience. Let the process work. Let the HOA feel the weight of their own actions. So we did exactly that. The vehicles stayed put while the paperwork moved forward. Every hour they sat in my garage cost the HOA money. Missed work, delayed projects, mounting legal fees. And the neighborhood noticed. By late afternoon, I started receiving messages from other homeowners. Some were confused. Others were quietly supportive. A few admitted they'd had similar run-ins with the HOA but were too afraid to push back. Now, watching the board scramble, they were realizing something important. The HOA wasn't untouchable. That night, the HOA sent out an emergency community update. It was full of vague language about misunderstandings and ongoing legal matters. No apologies, no accountability, just damage control. But the damage was already done. The next day, the police officially authorized the release of the trucks, under strict conditions. The HOA had to retrieve them under supervision, pay towing and storage fees, and formally acknowledge the trespassing incident. Watching them show up with red faces and clipped smiles was almost surreal. The same people who once barked orders were now careful with every word. Before they left, the HOA president tried one last time to salvage control. "Let's just put this behind us," she said. "We all want what's best for the community." I looked her straight in the eye and replied, "Then start respecting property lines." She didn't answer. As the trucks pulled away, I felt something shift, not just for me but for the entire neighborhood. The illusion of HOA dominance had cracked. People were paying attention now, asking questions, reading the bylaws more closely. And the board? They were finally realizing that entitlement only works when no one pushes back. Unfortunately for them, this was only the beginning. By the time the HOA board realized I wasn't bluffing, the situation had already spiraled far beyond their control. What started as a couple of entitled trucks parked in my garage had turned into a legal mess they couldn't bully their way out of. The police arrived later that evening, just as I said they would. 2 officers stepped out, calm and professional, and asked me to explain the situation. I handed them the security footage first. Clear as day. 2 HOA trucks pulling into my driveway, the garage door opening without my permission, and the drivers casually parking inside like it was a public lot. No emergency. No notice. No authorization. Then I handed them the property deed. The officer's tone shifted immediately. One of them raised an eyebrow and said, "So this is a private, locked residential garage?" "Correct," I replied. "And they're still inside." That's when the HOA president showed up, red-faced and furious, demanding I unlock the garage, right now. He tried to argue that the HOA had maintenance authority over all structures in the neighborhood. The officer shut that down fast. "Authority doesn't include breaking into private property," he said. "That's trespassing." The president stammered, backtracked, and then tried intimidation. He threatened fines, liens, and legal action. The officer calmly explained that threatening a homeowner while actively trespassing wasn't helping his case. In fact, it was making it worse. The drivers were ordered out of the garage. One of them looked genuinely embarrassed. The other looked angry, at me, not his boss. Both were issued citations for trespassing. The HOA president? He got a warning that came with a very clear message. Any further contact regarding this incident would go through lawyers. But it didn't stop there. The next week, I was served a notice from the HOA claiming I had unlawfully interfered with association operations. My attorney laughed when he read it. He filed a counterclaim the same day: trespassing, property damage, unauthorized access, and harassment. We attached the footage, the police report, and written statements from the officers. That's when the board started to panic. Emails began flooding in. First polite, then desperate. They wanted to resolve the matter amicably. They offered to waive future fines. Then they offered to pay for any inconvenience. I ignored all of it. After years of them overstepping boundaries and treating homeowners like tenants, this wasn't about inconvenience anymore. It was about accountability. The court date came faster than they expected. Sitting across from the HOA representatives, I could see it on their faces. They had assumed I'd cave, unlock the garage, and let them bully their way out like always. Instead, they were now explaining to a judge why they believed breaking into a private garage was acceptable. The judge didn't buy it. The ruling was brutal. The HOA was fined. The board was ordered to reimburse my legal fees. A formal injunction was placed preventing them from entering my property without written permission or a court order. And most satisfying of all, the board president was personally cited for authorizing the trespass. Word spread fast through the neighborhood. Suddenly, neighbors who had been quietly frustrated for years started speaking up. Stories came out: unauthorized inspections, intimidation, fines pulled out of thin air. Within months, a recall vote was initiated. Half the board was voted out. The president resigned before he could be removed. As for me, my garage stayed locked. My property stayed mine. And the HOA learned a lesson they never expected to learn the hard way. Entitlement only works when no one pushes back. This time, they parked in the wrong garage.